Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph.
Hello and welcome to Trial Talk with experienced attorney Michael Joseph. With over 20 years of experience in personal injury, commercial litigation, and criminal defense, Michael is committed to social and economic justice. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist. Today we're going to talk about the crisis of New York City construction worker deaths, building tragedies. Michael, great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So this is a tough but important topic. And in 2023, we saw a troubling rise in construction worker fatalities in New York City with 30 lives lost, the most in a decade. From your perspective, what are the primary factors contributing to this increase in construction worker deaths?
I think the primary cause is the same as it's always been. General contractors who don't provide adequate tools and safe work practices and are pushing the construction workers to get the jobs done faster and quicker. That, of course, has a negative effect on safety. So when they provide tools that are substandard, people get hurt and people get killed. When they force workers or try to push workers to work without the proper fall protections, that results in deaths. The number one cause of wrongful death on construction accidents is falling. So we all know that the Labor Law 240 in New York requires contractors to provide fall protection. And the reality is many of them just don't.
New York City has pretty stringent safety regulations for construction sites. So why do you think these regulations haven't been enough to prevent this spike in fatalities?
The problem is not whether or not the regulations are on the books. The problem is the contractors and landowners just don't follow them or they don't enforce them. And they just don't. So it's really a compliance issue. And really, when you say New York City has regulations, these regulations apply not only in New York City, but statewide. So everywhere in New York State, we're seeing a rise in construction accidents, a rise in construction deaths, and the laws are on the books. The problem is they're just not followed. And that's also the reason for the higher rates of building department fines, summonses being issued, because non-compliance is just a problem.
What areas of enforcement need to be stronger, in your opinion?
Well, certainly the requirements concerning fall protection need to be more vigorously enforced. It's almost funny, rather than take the problem seriously, what the construction industry has been doing is now trying to just blame the workers, say the falls themselves are fraudulent or people are faking accidents rather than taking responsibility for the accidents they caused. So I think the laws are in place. The building department just needs to really start enforcing these rules. And really, when people get hurt, they have to come forward and they have to bring claims because that's the only way to improve safety.
Do you feel like the workers are hesitant to bring claims?
I think certainly on some of the smaller accidents, people are afraid of losing their jobs. They want to keep working. They brush it off, and really, they're not doing themselves a favor because sometimes when you go back to work, what you think is a small injury could really be a more significant injury. And what happens is the more time that goes by that you suffer and try to work with these injuries and just kind of tough it out, you're giving the insurance companies ammunition to say, oh, no, this accident didn't happen. You were working. Or this accident wasn't that you weren't really hurt in that accident because you kept working. This happened somewhere else. And they're trying to blame your injuries on something else. So really, if you don't document the site conditions that caused the accident, fill out the proper reports, make sure they're correct, because these contractors are known to try to put in accident reports that it happened a different way, knowing that they're trying to jam up your lawsuit down the line. So really, the construction's worker, you really have to fend for yourself. You really have to protect yourself at all times and make sure you document what really happened because they really are out to get you. They're not on your side.
Do you feel like any lingering effects from the pandemic, like labor shortages, supply chain issues, all this stuff that we remember, do you think that could be contributing at all to the site safety going down a bit?
I don't necessarily think so because during COVID, I think they were actually a little more stringent with site protection. People had to work a certain distance from each other. Things were expected to be slower. It may be a lingering effect that they lost money during COVID. Now they're trying to make it up by pushing everyone to work harder. That's certainly a possibility. But the root cause is still the unsafe conditions, the failure to follow the rules and regulations that are in place, and really just cutting on safety to try to get jobs done faster and cheaper.
What is the responsibility of construction companies when it comes to worker safety? How do their practices contribute to the incidents? Is it just not following the rules? Are there other factors at play here?
Well, Jen, listen, construction has inherent risks. We all know that.
Of course,
And,
yeah.
and there's things there, but you can do dangerous things in a safe manner. And that's why we have things like Labor Law 240, which requires contractors to provide safe ladders, safe scaffolds, make sure the planks on scaffolds are adequate for the weight that they have to support. That's why we have the Industrial Code, which has a number of regulations that say, for example, you don't let guys work when it's icy and snowy on an outdoor construction site or a construction site that's exposed to the elements. You have to actually make some effort first to clean up the ice, clean up the snow so they can work safely. If a guy has to carry 50, 75 pounds on his back of sheetrock or rebar, you can't expect them to be looking at the ground and looking out for ice. Those pathways should be cleared. Same thing with tools. I've had a number of construction cases where guys trip on nails or step on nails while carrying something, or they trip on debris while they're carrying heavy loads or materials. So the problem is that during construction operations, certain debris is going to get in the way, or if you don't have safe practices to address these conditions, someone's going to get hurt. Same thing with demolition. While they're doing demolition, there's a reason they have requirements for chutes. That's so we don't have people just throwing debris off the side of a building onto the ground. So it goes into a chute and it goes down. That being said, people being struck by falling objects is still one of the major causes of construction accidents in New York. So the problem is there's so much of an incentive for people to just cut corners, not do things the safe way, just to try and get it done, get the job done quicker. Obviously, replacing old ladders costs money. So too many contractors force their employees to keep working on ladders that maybe are past their useful life, and then they fail. And then what we see, unfortunately, is all of a sudden, once an accident happens, while the guy is getting treated, all of a sudden these brand new aluminum ladders appear on site, and they're taking pictures of the brand new aluminum ladders to say, "Oh, look, we gave him safe tools." That those aluminum ladders weren't there before when the guy was working on an old wooden ladder.
Yeah, I suppose also the days of eating your lunch sitting on a beam way up in the sky, like the images that we've seen are over, right?
We'd like to think so, but probably not. I mean, those
Yeah.
beams still have to get placed and built, right? So that's why we require fall protection for guys who are actually working on it. They have to have harnesses and lines.
Right.
So in case they do fall off, iron workers are still exposed to falling hazards whenever new buildings get built. That's why we have scaffolds running along the side of buildings with nettings. So that if they do fall, they don't fall all the way to the ground. At least they're supposed to.
Yeah, ideally, yeah. For the families of these fallen workers, what legal options do they have for seeking justice and compensation?
So if you're a family member of a construction worker who died on the job, there's a number of remedies. First, you can always sue for a labor law violation. But there's a lot of procedural things that have to happen first that a lot of people may not be aware of. For example, even if you're married to a construction worker, you can't necessarily sue in your own name. You have to first go to surrogate's court, get an estate set up, and then once the estate is formed, then you can sue in the name of the estate for the pre-death pain and suffering and any financial losses, including loss of support, anything the law considers what's called pecuniary, which could include loss of guidance, education, nurture to children. All that has a value, and that can all be valued. But the first step is you have to go to surrogate's court and get an estate formed. Then once you have an estate formed, you can sue under any of New York's labor laws for violations of those labor laws. So obviously you want an experienced firm early on, taking pictures, figuring out what happened, gathering all the evidence before it disappears, getting statements from people who were on site. But in general, when a person dies on a construction site, the family, after they form the estate, has the right to sue for the person's pre-death pain and suffering and any financial loss that that person provided or would have provided had he continued to live. And that can include, for example, for a spouse with children, the construction worker's future earning capacity that you can show that would have went to their support, including benefits, vacation pay, pension, 401k. So on these cases, we get the union contracts, we get the benefit fund records, and we have economists provide projections of what the person would have made throughout the course of their life, how much of that would have gone to support the children and the spouse. And also we have evaluations not just of the direct money, but also how many hours a week do they spend doing house chores? How many hours a week do they spend playing with the kids or teaching them or reading to them? All that has a value in dollars and cents that can be included in a lawsuit.
What are some of the challenges that family members face, in holding those responsible accountable?
The usual family member is sitting at home watching TV or taking care of kids or doing something. All of a sudden, they get a call that their loved one's gone. They don't know. They don't know what happened. They don't know how it happened. The construction companies aren't exactly going to tell you and be honest. So, what do we have to do? They have to do an investigation and figure out the first question is what happened. Okay. So whenever there's a serious injury like this, like a death at a site, there's going to be a police record of what happened, the contemporaneous statements. There's going to be an incident report usually. There's going to be some sort of OSHA investigation. So we collect all those records. Also, there's usually witnesses that can be interviewed, and we do that to figure out what happened and why it happened. And the next step is look at to get into the surrogate's court. One interesting element with surrogate's court is if the person has children with different mothers, everybody has a right to something, but whoever gets to surrogate's court first usually has the right to control the lawsuit. So there's a lot of dynamics involved in a wrongful death of a construction accident. Not just was there a violation of the law, but all the procedural mechanisms that you have to go through. Now, if they died on, for example, a construction site, which was either a municipality, like a city or state, someone has to give notice of claim within 90 days. That's going to be a lawsuit. Otherwise, then you have to go to court and get special leave to file the lawsuit. And some of these judges are actually becoming way more conservative and denying these applications. So it's really important to get a qualified attorney as soon as possible, get the proper paperwork done so to protect your rights. Because if you blow a time limit, even unintentionally, the law doesn't really care that you're grieving. They still say you have to do it within a certain time period.
And what did you say that was, 90 days?
90 days if you're on a municipal job site, such as a city job,
Okay.
a public authority like the transit authority or the port authority jobs. So to hold one of those entities, which is a municipality liable, you have to file a notice of claim within 90 days of the act. So while you're sitting at home grieving, while you're making funeral arrangements and figuring out how you're going to support your kids, the law says during that same period of time, you have to file a piece of paper and submit it to the municipality if your loved one or your spouse died on a construction site that's owned by like the city of New York or a municipality or one of the counties. In private cases, it doesn't matter. You have a longer time period. But just in those on municipal jobs, we'll call them, you have a 90-day deadline.
It sounds like hiring an attorney early is pretty vital because then the attorney can handle a lot of that stuff, correct?
Correct. And you want to make sure you have somebody with experience who can dot the I's and cross the T's so that you can focus on mourning.
As a leading expert in construction injury law, what changes would you like to see in both legislation and construction practices in the coming years to make these sites safer?
Well, it'll never happen, but I'd like to see the notice of claim requirements eliminated. I'd like to see the statute of limitations for municipal job sites extended to be the same as normal job sites. And we'd like to see the additions to the industrial code to provide more protections for some of the areas that are just not covered right now.
Can you give an example? Like what isn't covered that you would like to see covered?
For example, lifting injuries aren't covered. So if they're forcing guys to lift 100-pound weights or 150-pound weights to do this or do that, and they have a back injury, that's not covered. It's covered by workers' compensation, but there's not a labor law directly on point. And there are a few other areas which I think could definitely use improvement.
And over the past, I don't know, decade or so, do you think it's gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Is it not really gone in the direction you would like to see it go?
I think construction accidents keep happening. That's the reality.
And like you said, they're always gonna happen, right? There's only so much you can do. Like obviously it's a dangerous job, but you haven't seen enough safety precautions put into place to make you feel better about it?
Well, it's not about matter how I feel. What we do is we handle cases for people who are injured because the safety provisions weren't put in place. So if the safety provisions are put in place, we don't get that call. No one gets that call. No one gets hurt. So you can do unsafe things in a safe way. But the problem is a lot of these companies just don't.
So for anyone listening who may have been injured, if they found our show and they may have been injured on a construction site, what do you recommend? What's the first thing they should do?
If they're injured in a construction accident, take pictures of what caused your injury. That's the most vital thing you can do to help yourself, because as soon as you get hurt, the general contractor, the owner, they're already on the phone with their insurance company. They're already trying to work against you. They're already trying to make it out that you got hurt in a way that they're not responsible for, or the defense du jour nowadays is they call the recalcitrant worker defense. You get hurt on a piece of equipment, they say, oh, we told you not to use that equipment. and they blame the construction worker. And that's what happens on case after case after case. So really documenting the scenes, documenting not only what caused the accident, but around you, what's available to you. Because all of a sudden, as soon as you get hurt and you get taken away to the hospital, I'm sure brand new shiny equipment shows up that they say, "Oh, why didn't you use this?" Well, it wasn't there.
Wasn't there, yeah. That could be proven with receipts and stuff too, right? Or is that hard to do?
That's hard. The receipts will never be produced.
Yeah. What happened? I don't know. I lost it. That kind of a thing.
No, it's been there for years. What are you talking about? Like the lengths to which an construction company will go to avoid liability is unfathomable. I mean, they're unscrupulous.
Sad, but true. All right. Well, thank you for joining us on Trial Talk with experienced attorney Michael Joseph. To connect with Michael, visit newyorktriallawyers.org. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Always great seeing you, Michael. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.